My name is Hugo Tapia. I am an assistant professor at Cal State University, Channel Islands.
What is the favorite part about your job?
So my favorite part of being a scientist and a professor here, they're probably in the side of the scientist part is you're investigating something that nobody else in the world is doing. So you're asking questions that we're asking that nobody else in the world is asking because it's a specific question that we've come up with in the lab. So whatever we come up with is going to be new to kind of everybody else, right?
Yes.
And in terms of teaching, it's really fun to teach undergrads. You're teaching them a lot of fresh new concepts, and every time they figure it out, once you see they learn it, it's really rewarding. So I really enjoy that part.
If you could go back and give some advice to your undergraduate self, what would you say?
To ultimately take a better planning of my career. I started out as a double major because I had two loves, and I still have these two loves, and I thought I wanted to do both of them. So I was a double major in biology and in music. And what happened from that was something that I was not expecting, was that my GPA fell horribly. I was taking a lot of hard biology courses, but I was taking a lot of fun music classes. So music was fun. I was drumming all day long. We were having fun. We were playing music. We were doing marching band. And then I went to biology. And although I liked it, it was not as fun as music. And I completely put biology to aside my first semester, and I actually dropped my GPA really, really bad. And as a lot of undergrads know, it's really easy to drop your GPA, but almost impossible to bring it back up. I'd say be more focused from the beginning and ultimately figure out what you really want to do, even though it's hard. You guys are 17 years old. You guys just stopped asking for permission to go to the restroom, and now you guys have to figure out your careers. And it's really hard, and your first 2 years will be hard, but it is a time that you have to hunker down and figure out what your next steps are going to be, right? It's a big step, but that's what we're here for.
So how did you learn to schedule your time and regulate when you didn't have anyone else doing that for you?
So that took time. That is something that I guess also happens a lot to CI students here, because I went to University of Texas El Paso, which is also a commuting college. And like many of the students here, I was taking a full course in college. I had a close to full-time job outside of college, and I was working inside of a lab within the university. So my time was stretched, as I can see a lot of undergrads here. They're doing a lot of different things at the same time. But the most important thing was ultimately just finding that time to study. It took me a while to figure out, but I had to ask permission from my full-time job to actually give me time, and I had to set blocks of time apart, and where there was nothing but, of course, the cell phone distraction was not there for me before, which was really great, but it was something that it was just sitting in the library with the textbooks that we had to read and the homeworks and the problem sets, and 2 or 3 hours a week at least, that it was just dedicated to that. That was nothing except for that, right? Of course, there's also the free time. You have to dedicate a lot of stuff, free time to yourself, go to the movies, have fun. But there was time specifically for that took me a little while to realize, because I thought I could just wing it. I thought I could just come to school, hear what the professor was going to say, and that was all I needed, and it was all going to sink in, and I could come to the test. And of course, that wasn't it, right? There's a reason why you're assigned a textbook and so many notes and so many resources to read, right? So
what advice would you give students who think they want to enter a STEM profession?
Do it. It's science. The questions are never going to end. There's always going to be jobs, whether it's through doing normal biology or going to industry. The jobs are going to be there. The questions are going to be there, and the discoveries are going to be there. Every year we come up with something new, something either through the graces of basic science, something as beautiful as CRISPR comes out, and now CRISPR DNA technology is revolutionizing the world, and that was just through a basic science observation in a basic biology lab. They were not thinking about studying DNA editing. They were looking at microbiology, and they figured something out. So this kind of thing can happen, and it's going to keep on happening. We're just seeing what's happening with immunotherapy. Again, they got the Nobel Prizes here, and it was from a basic finding that Jim Allison did at the University of Berkeley a long time ago. So the discoveries are there, the questions are there, and we need to keep humans alive one way or another and keep us healthier, so we need to keep on asking questions.
What are the 3 key study strategies that you recommend most for STEM majors?
So that was hard. One of the first, like I said earlier, was just get a good dedicated amount of time. Make sure you set a block of time where you're doing nothing but studying. Nowadays, I'd even put the cell phone away. It's such an easy distraction. Just when you're reading the book, to quickly check whatever the kids are checking out, whether it's Facebook, the Snapchat, whatever. It's such an easy one. Just put it away and get your textbook out and just read for a couple of hours. The second one was that helped me a lot was teaching my peers. You don't really learn until you are able to teach. If you can comfortably take, like earlier this semester, we taught them daily genetics. If you could take a section of Mendelian genetics and teach it to your friend, the same person that's in class with you, and they can understand it and they can teach you back, that's what's required. That is what's really needed for learning ultimately. If you can teach it, you've learned the subject. And lastly is that even though memorization is really big, there's a lot of classes where you're going to have to memorize. There's organic chemistry. There's a lot of things where memorization is key because you just have to learn a lot of facts. Learning the subject or learning the idea is a lot more important. The concepts are big. For example, in genetics, the concepts are really big, and memorization is key for a lot of small ones. But once you get the big idea, once you get the idea of inheritance and heredity, how chromosomes are spreading, once you get the bigger ideas, you can ultimately get to the smaller parts and break down the smaller parts, right? But I think getting the concepts getting and being able to teach the concepts to others is really key.
How is research important to an undergrad's academic development?
That's a fun question. So I think it's really important. I've started my lab now, and I already have 6 students that are going to start coming into my lab and working. And I think once they come into the lab and start doing research, it kind of changes the face of biology. When you're in the undergrad looking at the textbook, you're reading all these experiments, and yes, sure enough, Avery figured out that DNA was the transformation principle. Cool. You don't know how they did it, even though we're explaining to you that he took nucleases, he took protease, he did this really fancy experiment, you don't really see it. And you take a cell biology lab, and yes, you do an experiment with mitochondrial dehydrogenase, but you know the result. The result is expected because it's a planned lab. It's not until we have them in the lab and you set up a hypothesis that you've examined for a while, and they start doing the experiments, and after a lot of failed experiments, because we fail, that's what we do in science, once we get a real result in an experiment and you see that they understand that they have a result that could go in a textbook, that's something that nobody's figured out before, that is rewarding. And they're part of the scientific process now. It's not just them doing a science experiment for the sake of doing a science experiment. Now it is science for the sake of knowledge. That was actually one of my awakenings when I started working in the lab as an undergrad. We published a paper. I wasn't part of the paper, but I helped kind of. I was in the acknowledgements. But we got that paper out, and finally there was something in print that we helped do that was not just a textbook, right? So that was really fun. That was try to get into a lab. There's a lot of us doing science. So there's me, there's Dr. Harris doing nematode work, there's Dr. Fleming doing microbiology. There's a lot of us doing science, and a lot of the students don't know that it's an option for you guys to actually come and do science in our labs and do independent science. It's called you could actually even get credit for it. It's called independent research, $4.94. You could sign up for a semester and come and do research, and I'd give you a hypothesis. We'd work together in the lab. We accommodate your hours, right? Say you could come in Monday, Wednesday, Fridays from 4 to 5 in the afternoon or 4 to 6. That's when I would work with you. We try to work something out. The other thing, don't be afraid of the professors. Come and talk to us. We were where you were. Come and talk to us. If you guys see an open office and have any questions about whether it's the course you're taking or whatever your next step is, if the door is open, my door is open for a reason. Come and ask questions, right?
Why is it important to establish and encourage an environment which fills STEM careers with diverse individuals? So,
we all think different, and if you get a lot of people that ultimately see the think or create the same ideas, the same hypothesis, very little changes, right? It's not until there's a lot of riches and a reason why America's had such great ideas, because we're this gigantic melting pot.
What advice would you give parents to help them encourage their students to continue on STEM pathways?
That's a fun question. Keep on asking questions even when you don't understand the answers. It doesn't matter. Your kids are going to want to talk. If they're in the lab and they're working with me on intrinsically disordered proteins, that is a 12 kilodalton size protein that helps membranes, what does that mean? Nobody cares. Your kid cares. And so listen to them, and if you can respond intelligently, well, great. But if you can't, just nod and listen. But they want to talk. And once they're doing the science, they want to talk. And even though you might not understand what they're saying, and you might be yourself and think these guys are strange, but for whatever reason, they're studying DNA and they're doing all these crazy things, your kids are excited about it. And you might not understand it, but just listen to them. The other thing that I saw was really fun for me, for the 2 undergrads that I trained at Berkeley, was that their parents actually came to their talks. They gave a couple of talks at Berkeley, and both of their moms came. And as soon as I saw their moms and I saw both Skylar's and Suchin's faces, that made a big difference, right? Because yes, you're giving talks in front of your colleagues, in front of your people all the time, but giving it in front of your mom, once your mom actually sees what you spent all these last 2 years doing it inside of a lab, which sounds weird because why are you in a lab, dude, for 2 years? What are you doing there till 10 at night? Once they see that you came up with a hypothesis and you came up with results, and these results actually mean something, that is fun, right? So try to be there, try to ask the questions, right? And that's encouraging. My mom was there. She asked a lot. She didn't understand half of the time. I did a semester of research in South Carolina, and I came back that summer talking about rhamnolipids, which is a detergent created by a bacteria that helps eat petroleum. Who cares? But she cared, right? So she asked. I had a poster. She hung it up in my room. She cared, right? So it was, yeah, because it's
significant and made a difference.
Yep.